And so I think back to the type of communities that were affected by disinformation, how they were told dates to go vote were different than what's on the actual website for the supervisor of elections office, that polling locations were closed when it really wasn't closed.
Where do you land on the AI conversation?
We may be making calls and talking to AI, how doctors transcribe their notes. There are ways to use AI to make it more efficient. We represent local radio and TV broadcasters. And, always be able to advocate for the media spaces for people that look like us to be in these media spaces. Mm-hmm. And what data do people have?
Yeah.
Particularly like their location data, and what's being targeted. I think that's really what's key when it comes to algorithmic accountability.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of The Policy Plug. It's your boy, Breon Wells. So listen, as we always do, thank you for rolling with us in this journey. We've been building a culture that is policy-oriented, that is diverse, a space where we know that everybody knows that they can fit in these policy streets. No matter your background, you don't need to change anything about yourself to be able to articulate your needs to your elected officials. So listen, today's topic is on digital equity. We know we're in the digital age. It's not coming. It's something that's already here. We're in this digital age. We're in this information age. You all have heard me say before that information is gold. It is the chiefest of the currencies that we have. But this also means that there are opportunities that all communities, especially multi-marginalized Black people, brown people, LGBTQ plus people can enjoy. But there's also challenges, because if we build off of a foundation that is already incomplete, that is already corrupt, that might not be fully accessible to all people, we're only accelerating and exacerbating existing harms. So today, as I'm thinking about the multitude of opportunities, the economic opportunities, concepts like digital redlining come to mind, but also concepts like venture capitalism and the ability for these wealthy funders to pour in to startups and to talent, and that this digital wave can be something that we all benefit from is what I'm thinking about. As you know, we always have the dopest of guests, the ones that are the drivers of these forces, the ones who influence policy. And I want us to clap it up in a big way for our special guest today, the Charlyn Stanberry. Hey, hey.
Thank you.
What up? How you feeling today?
I'm feeling great.
Good. Welcome to the Policy Plug, fam. You'll find it is a dope vibe here. We are all things authentic, and we talk about things that really you and I have connected on for years in policy.
I'm going to do whatever you ask me to do. And I love talking policy.
Right. So one of the things we do here, we are going to get into policy discussions, but we try to help connect the dots between some of the people who influence policy with the audience. Because often when they see, especially those that are known, they just see the work, they see the title, but there's a whole human element behind it. So we humanize the people who influence policy. So start off by, for those that might not know you, who is Charlyn Stanberry? Like, where do you hail from? Who?
That's a great question. So Charlyn Stanberry, I am born and raised from Jacksonville, Florida.
Okay.
If I have an accent, it's because I'm Gullah Geechee, so I'm always
Come on, Gullah Geechee.
I'm a true Florida girl. Just fortunate to be able to be in D.C. and to work in more of a policy element. My most influential people in my life have been my great-grandmother and my great-granduncles. So, this generational aspect when we talk about digital equity and when we talk about marginalized communities is very important to me. I've worked on Capitol Hill. I've been fortunate to work for Congressional Black Caucus, fortunate to work for Congresswoman Yvette Clarke from Brooklyn, New York, BK.
Yeah.
And now I'm fortunate to be working in the policy space with a lot of broadcasters.
Okay. And when you were with Yvette Clarke, and let me say this because Charlyn is really one of the humblest people you'll meet. She was chief of staff to the Yvette Clarke. And for those that don't know what a chief of staff is, they're the ones that help advise the member, the chiefest advisor of the member, but they help literally, as it says in the title, manage the staff, manage the flow of the office. They are well connected. So, you know, again, as usual, we got like the most well connected people on this.
I always call it chief of stuff. Because no telling what I'm going to end up doing on a day-to-day basis.
You got to learn to be flexible.
Got to learn to be flexible.
And now you said you work with broadcasters. Is that through the National Association of Broadcasters?
Absolutely. So, National Association of Broadcasters is a trade association. We represent local radio and TV broadcasters. And I'm also fortunate to work from it from an aspect to interact with black broadcasters from like NABOB, the National Association of Black-Owned Broadcasters. Yeah. And, you know, always be able to advocate for the media spaces for people that look like us to be in these media spaces. And ownership spaces with that too.
Absolutely. And we're going to unpack that a little more later because we had a great like live taping with Congresswoman Yvette Clarke and John Gibson of the Motion Picture Association, in which we were talking about Black Media Matters and talking about the Multicultural Media Caucus, which you were there and were her chief of staff at the time when they were establishing it, when she was founding it. Actually, you know, before I get to this other question, just kind of walk us through that. Like, you know, what is the Multicultural Media Caucus and just kind of how did that come to be?
Oh, that's a great question. So the Multicultural Media Caucus and it's the Congressional Caucus on Multicultural Media, which is basically members of Congress who have like-minded issues when it comes to multicultural media and how do you move the needle. So Congresswoman Clarke has been fortunate to have two co-chairs, Congresswoman Judy Chu from California and Congressman Tony Cartness. And so they've been able to advocate and have programming on Capitol Hill related to multicultural media and just basically expand and let people talk about these issues and how do you get involved. So they've had great partners. John Gibson, who you mentioned from Motion Picture Association, has been a wonderful partner for the Multicultural Media Caucus. And I know, speaking from my aspect and also for the Congresswoman, when she was thinking about establishing it, it was really because she didn't want our voices to be lost when it comes to what we see on TV, what we see on the internet, you know, what we have on our phone. She just really wanted to make sure that the users and the consumers of this technology see people that look like them.
Yeah.
So whether it's, you know, hey, I'm watching something on, for example, BET.
Yep.
Or maybe I have my own podcast and I'm talking about issues that affect marginalized communities. That was really the importance of having that caucus and making sure that we have members of Congress who are advocating for it on Capitol Hill.
Yep.
Not just through programming, but also through the pieces of legislation that they move.
Yeah. I'm a shift gears on the humanizing aspect. One of the things that, because we've known each other for a while, one of the things that I've always appreciated about you, brilliant when it comes to the policy, especially tech policy, steeped in it. But you have always been like accessible to people. You've always been yourself, which is not always the case, right? Like sometimes people feel like they get in these spaces and they have to be this tight, professional, like, you know, kind of rigid and not relatable. Every time I see you, you always repping Florida. You always, you know, yourself. You're very much inviting. As long as I've known you, you've always been in this sort of mentorship and yet giving back into the community role. And so just shout out to you on just how you authentically show up, because that's what we strive to promote here on the Policy Plug, is this thing of like, be yourself and you're already enough to be in these policy spaces.
I appreciate you, my brother. I think one of the things that allows me to be myself, I think back to my humble beginnings. And I think back to my great grandmother. She was born, I remember this, she was born June 2nd, 1918. And so
that was the Spanish flu, the global pandemic. Wow.
She was born during one of our main pandemics, even before COVID. And so I just think about all of the things that she taught me. And one of the things that she taught me is, it's really about not what you have and what you do for other people, but like, how do you make them feel? And so in my day to day, that's basically what I reflect on, and just making her proud, or just having that foundation that she gave to my grandmother, that she gave to my mother, and that I've been fortunate to have.
Yeah. That's almost like that intergenerational traits that has gone down. That's real dope. I did not know that.
Yeah.
I did not know. Look, learn something new every day. So we're in 50 years of hip hop.
Yes.
Who is your favorite hip hop artist?
Ooh, that's a great question. I'm a Florida girl.
Okay.
So, and this tells you a lot about me I can do my professional thing and I can do my Florida girl thing. So if I had to think about it, the person that I listen to the most probably is going to be a mixture of Trina, Trick Daddy, and Rick Ross. So that tells you a whole lot about my personality.
Wait a minute. Trina, Trick Daddy, and Rick Ross.
Trick Daddy, and Ross.
So this is, if they came together to do a Dynamite album, that would be it. You'd be in.
Slip and Slide Records, I would be right there. So one thing that I never really talk about, I actually have a cousin that was in a group called 95 South, because I'm originally from Jacksonville, and Jacksonville goes through 95 South. And they had a song way back in the day, Whoop, There It Is.
Yeah.
So that was like our claim to fame. Like, oh, we got a cousin that's in 95 South. And, they got Quad City DJs and all these places. But my hip hop is mainly a Florida thing.
Right.
So I still got Plies on my playlist. T-Pain, definitely. Tallahassee Pain. But yeah, I can listen to Rick Ross, Trina, and Trick Daddy all day, every day.
All day, every day. See, y'all see what I'm talking about? Very professional, and yet, who can't relate to that? Who can't? So, if you could travel anywhere, or anywhere that you haven't been, because you do travel, for vacation, where would that be?
That's a great question. I think I want to be on a beach in Africa.
Okay.
So I've been looking at places like Tanzania, Kenya has a couple beaches. So I think I want to do a beach in Africa, probably.
Okay. Yeah. Last one, and I'm going to ask this thinking of the Multicultural Media Caucus. If there was a TV show or a movie that you would say resonated or somewhat resembled your life, what would it be?
Okay, so ironically, another anniversary we're coming up on is Living Single.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
I would definitely say that Living Single to me would model my life, and just being around like fun-loving friends who get on your nerves, but you're all professionals.
Right.
Now, we don't live all together, so to speak.
Right.
But I think, and you're included in that crew, right? I think we rock well together.
Yep.
And as I was growing up, a lot of people used to tell me, you remind me of Maxine Shaw.
I was about to ask you which character, and that's exactly where I was going.
So, yeah, I think Living Single would be it. Now, in college, I always felt like it was more of a different world.
Okay.
But the older I get, I definitely resonate with Living Single.
I'm curious, who in a different world, who was the character that like really resonated with you?
Probably Kimberly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So, where did you go to college? And I know Florida. Every time you ask somebody from Florida, where'd you go to undergrad?
So I'm different.
Okay.
A lot of people are probably going to be thinking that I'm going to say FAM or Florida State or UF. I am a proud grad of the University of Central Florida in Orlando.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm a Golden Knight. Through and through. So I got my bachelor's degree in business administration there. And then I got my master's degree in public administration there too.
Okay. And then lawyer?
Lawyer, yes.
Come on here. Where'd you go? Where'd you go to law school? Come on, degree down.
So I went to law school at Florida International University in Miami. So that's probably where the Miami Ross, Trick, and Trina come from.
Gotcha.
So I'm still back and forth a lot between DC and Miami, a whole lot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I'm telling y'all, the folks we have on this show are degree down and yet they relatable. So as we're looking at, digital equity, because one of the things, even when you were working on the Hill and we were working together, that tech policy has always been something that has been like on the forefront.
Absolutely.
Of your mind. We know that over time we've had conversations on Section 230, which is about, the Communications Decency Act and trying to make sure that basically there is some sort of accountability responsibly for social media and other entities that may provide space for people to communicate things, but also in ways that's not being so, petty, that it's hindering innovation. Algorithmic bias.
Yes.
We have algorithms that now on social media, as we're trying to figure out what's bringing me stuff on my wall, my timeline, how are they associating these commercials, these ads that are coming through. But then we also had this topic of disinformation and misinformation. I think the world definitely caught the trend. The U.S. caught the trend, particularly around the 2016 election.
Absolutely.
But disinformation, I often, try to bring up, is as old as you had like 2 or 3 people, like in the caveman time. As long as you had 2 people or 3 people, there's a opportunity for miscommunication, first of all. I often think of it as disinformation is the intentional use of bad information to malign somebody, to achieve whatever end, deflect. Misinformation is more like I didn't do my homework, I didn't fact check, but I saw something on Twitter. I just saw the headline, didn't read the article, and I said, let me just retweet. I'm passing on information that I might not have done the good diligence, didn't have any intention of doing anything malicious. But what are you seeing in your field on how disinformation and misinformation is kind of growing, proliferating now?
Absolutely. I think back to working on the 2016 Hillary campaign, actually. And I was down in South Florida, actually, doing voter protection. And so I think back to the type of communities that were affected by disinformation. Particularly minority communities, Caribbean communities, whether, they were Haitian, whether they were Jamaican, whether it was Trini, how they were told that the dates to go vote were different than what's on the actual website for the Supervisor of Elections office, how they were told that polling locations were closed when it really wasn't closed. So in my field, I'm fortunate to work more on the news side. And so I advocate for local radio and TV broadcasters. And it was important to me because I think back to my childhood, how my great grandmother had the radio on 24/7. And that's how we got our local news. That's how we got our emergency alerts. That's how we listened to interviews about breaking news, about things going on. Even the local TV, we knew she had that TV on 4 p.m., 12 p.m., 9 p.m., all the time because it was a trusted source. So I think for me, working more on the broadcasting side, it's about working for a trusted source that represents the local communities. So if you think back to who's your radio DJ that you know, for example, my cousin's a DJ back home in Jacksonville, DJ Kool-Aid. So I'm going to give him a shout out, DJ Kool-Aid.
Come on, DJ Kool-Aid.
People know DJ Kool-Aid. They trust DJ Kool-Aid. I think back to our current mayor in Jacksonville, Donna Deegan, was a local TV broadcaster. And so people were familiar with their faces. They knew that they were going to give them trusted information that was localized and that it was important and that they could trust it. And it's different than some of the sources that we get now where, like you mentioned, you just get one post and you can share it, but you're not fact checking.
Yeah. You brought up something that stirred my mind to an earlier episode that we have had. We had an episode with Philip Lewis from HuffPost.
Yeah.
Used to be Huffington Post. And part of our conversation was on the fact that he writes for a national kind of media, but a lot of the journalism at the local level is not supported at the rate that it should be, used to be. In fact, I think he used the term it is dying out. And in some ways, that conversation talked about how misinformation and disinformation is often the breeding ground when those spaces are not in existence, because the benefit of local journalism, local print media, is the community is smaller. So if you show up in untrustworthy ways, there's already an immediate retribution, but there's that accountability inherently that makes you have to produce good, verified reporting. In the field of broadcasting, local, local radio stations, local news stations, are we seeing a similar trend in as we are in print journalism of they're not being as supported? Are they dying out? What would you say is the status of like local broadcasting?
Well, first I'll shout out to Philip Lewis, because he literally probably is like my main journalist that I retweet all the time. Like, I just trust anything that he's posting. So, shout out to Philip for being just a great journalist and a great role model, I think, for the pipeline of Black journalists that we're getting. So, to your question about, are we kind of seeing this dying out or is it extinct? One of the things I would say is there's a couple of pieces of legislation, not to get too wonky in policy, that I'm fortunate to be working on. And one is called the Local Journalism Sustainability Act. And so this is a bill that came to fruition during the pandemic.
Okay.
Because what we saw in the pandemic is there was all this like misinformation out there about what COVID is, whether you should get shots. They were targeting marginalized communities. And so for the Local Journalism Sustainability Act, that bill is about, our legislation is about getting grants to local news stations.
Yep. And this is a congressional, so it's a federal bill. It's Congress giving grants to which entity or agency does do the grants tend to come from?
So great question. That's still being worked out.
Got it.
Yeah. So, but that bill is more of the grant funding to the newsroom. So we're still working more from like an agency perspective of like where the grants would be flowing from on the executive level. Got you.
And so then that in itself helps these local broadcasters, one, sustain themselves, but then the intention, you said it was during the pandemic is when that ideal kind of came about. It was to help make sure that they were okay because they're often more trusted than national sources in putting out information like around COVID or even other things, so that the listeners could not even have to question or have a second guess about the information they were getting.
Absolutely. I mean, if we think back to who we trust, we trust like our local stations because they are representing the community.
Yep.
So even on a regular basis, when you think about how you find out this actual event is in park so-and-so, or, this DJ is hosting X, Y, and Z voter registration drive. Our local journalists and our local news stations have kind of been that bedrock of news. Now, there are ways that we are trying to advocate for not only more funding, but just more amplification of the importance of local radio and TV stations. And so I wouldn't say that it's dying out, so to speak, because I think we're always going to have a need for that localism aspect.
Yeah.
but we need to amplify and make sure more funding is going that way. Because just like you mentioned, if you look at newspapers, think back to the last time that you've kind of looked at a newspaper physically.
Right.
A lot of us are looking at things online. So it's making sure that we give them the eyeballs that they need, or making sure that we have these subscriptions to make sure that they're sustainable.
Yeah. I'm going to take us in a different direction. Flow with me.
Okay.
As we are looking at AI,
yes,
artificial intelligence, and it's been on the news a lot lately. We know that even, the Senate Majority Leader Schumer has been looking a lot at AI. He's been working even across the aisle on the Senate side to look at AI. We just had Elon Musk on the Hill. We had Mark Zuckerberg. I think Bill Gates was just on CNN recently talking about AI. The guy who was considered the grandfather of AI is saying, you know what, there's some inherent dangers and almost I regret even AI. And this is why I say flow with me. Often it feels like what we're hearing is this Terminator, iRobot, Doomsday.
You're dating us.
They are true. I am. Where my toaster oven, is now about to jump out in here and maybe kill me. We get in these spaces, and I'm interested in your thoughts on the potential dangers of AI where we are, because for me, I don't see a space where we're necessarily in the Terminator, sort of that we can't control technology, where it's just going to have a mind of its own and just start taking over humankind. However, I think that misses the point of the inherent dangers, when you have incomplete data sets and other things that we don't need to get to the future to think about the harms that are already hitting us. But what do you subscribe to? Is the world about to end with AI coming over, proliferating? Is there, are we okay in the middle? Where do you land on the AI conversation?
I think I'm more in the middle and balance. Do I want iRobot and Terminator? No.
Right.
I barely want real people in my business, to be honest with you. I think that, we have to think about how we use AI now. For example, we may be making calls and talking to AI.
Yeah.
And not a real person.
Yep.
But it may be more efficient. Thinking about how doctors transcribe their notes during a actual medical visit is different now. They don't have to really just write on a piece of paper. They can be talking through technology that transcribes it for them in that computer. So there are some efficient ways of using AI. Now, I think that there always needs to be a human element to it. Because like you said, we don't want these robots just taking over everything, because there's actually going to be, some type of damage that's done if that is the case. But I think that there are ways to use AI to make it more efficient for what we do. Another thing that I think about is Congresswoman Clark, thinking back to my Hill days.
Yeah.
She also was a co-chair and started the Smart Cities Caucus.
What's smart cities? Because I think a lot of people hear it, and I do love that concept. I'm a fan of that. But what are smart cities?
Smart cities is basically just the usage of how technology is used within government, whether it's or within a city itself or a municipality. So, her key pillars were about sustainability, that, environmental piece. How do you use technology to make environment better when it comes to your city or your county or your municipality?
Right.
Mobility. We have a lot of bike lanes. Are we using technology with the lights to configure them at a certain time frame, or turn them on, turn them off? And then just the connectivity, the connection aspect, your cell phones and the cell towers that we have. And there's also a huge workforce development piece that we don't talk about. We're always thinking more on the technology side and not necessarily about what jobs are these creating.
So the future of work.
The future of work, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think when one of the things that I know you and I worked on, the Algorithmic Accountability Act.
Yes.
And that was a bill that was really written and sponsored by, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. Mm-hmm. And I think that is in some ways where I land on the AI thing is artificial intelligence, algorithms. There has to be some level of regulation, some level of accountability. Mm-hmm. Like we can't just sit here and let things on autopilot nor turn a blind eye, right? As if we haven't had these issues. What was, and let's just kind of unpack, what was the intention behind the Algorithmic Accountability Act?
Ooh, great question. Thinking back to what was going on when that bill was written, I think that was a time frame in which you mentioned, for example, when you're on the internet and we get like these different ads and commercials. I don't know if people remember Omega Sci-Fi had a convention. Mm-hmm. And while they were at the convention, a lot of the black males at the convention were getting targeted for bail bonds.
Right.
So, thinking about the accountability aspect of what data do people have?
Yeah.
Particularly like their location data and what's being targeted? Who has that data? Who may be showing up to these places? I think that's really what's key when it comes to algorithmic accountability.
Got you. What is the potential then economically? Because, with this digital age that we're in, mm-hmm. there's, of course, challenges, but there's also like opportunities. What are ways that you would suggest, whether they are business owners, black business owners, even not just black, brown, other multi-marginalized folks, how can everyday folks like really navigate this digital age towards their benefit, economically? Like we know and we've outlined that there's the biases. We know that there's these other challenges. But one, do you see that there's a way of opportunity? And what would you say are some like low hanging fruit ways that they can engage?
I think that's a great question. So when we talk about policy, people think that it's like this big heavyweight thing. You also want to think about your local side. So who are your local electeds? What rules and policies are they making that may effectuate you on a local level? Mm-hmm. So I think just knowing what changes that are related to all the digital equity piece that we were saying on a local level. It could be as simple as people putting up video cameras in an apartment complex are using facial recognition technology for people to be able to get in that apartment complex. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is because, again, we dealt with that when I worked on the Hill in the Congresswoman's office about, is this targeting our communities?
Right.
And the people who were advocates for that to go against the legislation on a local level that they were trying to put when it came to facial recognition technology was the housing division. So I think just knowing what are those key changes that may affect you on a local level and being a voice, whether you have to go to your city hall meetings, your council meetings. I think that's most important, and it's going to trickle up to more of a congressional level because what's happening on the ground locally is what's going to affect on a federal level.
So basically, in this case, you think the momentum is going to have to start in the localities, the municipalities, and then that from that momentum, it'll either open the door for Congress or it'll inspire Congress to think of some innovative ways to kind of combat
absolutely
this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So last thing, why does policy matter to you? I mean, clearly you're passionate about it. I'm passionate about it. But like, you know, one of the reasons we started this culture, I can't even call it a podcast anymore. It went from podcast to a show the reason we, you know, put together this ecosystem, this culture, is because policy touches every aspect of life. Mm-hmm. And we wanted everybody to know, like, there's a space for you here. What would you say to young woman from Florida?
Okay.
Who might be like, the policy thing ain't really me, ain't really my name. Why does policy matter?
Ooh, policy matters the same way that we say voting matters. That's the only way that you're going to be able to make a change. So I think the same emphasis that we put when in regards to voting in elections, we need to put into having a voice when it comes to policy. You can be an average person. You don't have to be like Breon and I.
Right.
You don't have to work on the Hill or do X, Y, and Z. Some of the best advocates that I've seen and that I've utilized have been the average day person that can talk about their story, that can talk about how policy is going to effectuate change and why that change should happen. So I think it's one of these things where like every person counts and everything counts.
Absolutely. You know, thank you for being our guest here. I have definitely enjoyed this conversation. As you said at the top, this is a friend-to-friend conversation.
Yes.
And we just happen to be deliberating over policy. And I learned some new things. I learned that I need to look, was it Slip and Slide Records?
Slip and Slide.
We need to make this Trina, Trick Daddy, Rick Ross collab
we can add
happen.
Pitbull and a whole bunch of other people if you want. Plies, everybody.
So a Justice League of Florida joke,
Yes.
Florida artists. Got it. So listen, we have been having this discussion on, we're in this digital age. We're in this time where there's not only challenges, but there's opportunities. There's opportunities for you to pull up. We already know that a vast majority of us are on Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, and all the things. Each one of those tools, yes, they have their inherent challenges, and yes, there's some room for improvement, but there's also opportunity, but that's only going to happen if you roll up at the table in strategic ways. But even as Charlyn said, the most important thing is that you think about the importance of how policy can be used as that tool and that agent of change to get you where you need to go. You don't want to miss out on all of the economic opportunity, the safety, the peace of mind that can be had in these digital streets. So this has been another wonderful episode of The Policy Plug. This is a space where we humanize the people who influence policy and bring the policy to the people.